Hi, I'm Alicia Belant, and this is my qualitative research project presentation for ATRN 8210, Qualitative Research Methodology at AT Still University. I chose to study the grief process in injured athletes. Grief in athletes has been well studied, particularly for season or career-ending injuries. The purpose of my study, however, was to determine if and how athletes experience the grief process when faced with clinically less significant injuries. My guiding clinical question was, do athletes undergo the grief process for less clinically significant injuries? The research tradition best suited for my study was phenomenology, which focuses on how people experience and draw meaning from their worlds. I used a criterion method for participant selection. Specifically, I chose 3 high school athletes who had sustained a musculoskeletal injury that same season and had missed 14 or less days of athletic participation due to that injury. I chose to interview them following their return to sport so they were potentially able to go through the entire grief process. I chose 14 days because many clinically less significant injuries would heal enough to allow the athlete a full return to sport in that time frame. These high school athletes consisted of one male soccer player with a high ankle sprain. He had missed 10 days. Another male soccer player missed 7 with a quadriceps strain. I had also involved a female swimmer who had sustained a deltoid strain and had missed 4 days. As I had mentioned previously, I interviewed these athletes following their full return to sports participation. To summarize the interview, I was able to draw out 3 themes. All 3 athletes experienced the grief process, though some faster than others. Each athlete indicated they felt worse about being injured by having to miss a competition. However, they all felt better and less guilty by knowing they had support from their team. Observation took place at practice while the injured athletes were sidelined. These athletes tried to maintain some form of involvement with their team, whether it was assisting with drills or helping fill water bottles. I also observed other athletes telling the injured athletes to stay positive. Many teammates inquired when the injured athletes would return to sport. Each of these athletes underwent the grief process, which was made worse by missing competitions. However, each looked to their team for support, and I believe the team atmosphere and interactions with these team members helped the injured athletes feel supported. Participant checks were performed following observations and interviews to ensure data had been interpreted correctly. Participants were also allowed to make any additions at that time. Also, this study would be simple enough for another researcher to conduct on their own, and I would anticipate results would be similar. As an amateur qualitative researcher, I would say this experience was not without challenges. I found selected participants to be somewhat hesitant at first to the idea of an interview on their feelings. However, they all warmed up to the idea when I mentioned other athletes deal with grief. I did find it rewarding to find out more about my athletes and what their internal experiences are while they are injured. I think it brings a new perspective on how they internalize their injuries and how team and social dynamics play a role. It could help both coaches and athletic trainers more clearly address the needs of their athletes. I'd like to say thank you for your time, and I hope you learned something as well.